Hello everyone, welcome to this video of Revive Therapy, weight loss hypnotherapy and why diets fail. So first, let's start with what is weight loss hypnotherapy? Weight loss hypnotherapy is more so focusing on the cognitions, the beliefs, and also the emotions that trigger running to the wrongest foods for fat loss. A lot of times we get detained by eating junk that's tempting. Why is it tempting? Usually tied to sugar. Sugar is addicting. In many cases, many of us can become very highly addictive to sugar and run to these instead of the healthier foods. So here we're not just dealing with willpower or calorie counting. It has to do with what are the foods that are provoking us to then go after it so that we can have some type of maladaptive distraction. That could be insulin, that could be just the euphoria of how good it tastes, but more often than not, it's the physiological effect that sugar has in our bodies and how we come back to it, back to that same potato chip or back to that candy and just keep eating more of it while it spikes our sugars and it creates a cyclical, addictive, repetitive sequence where we're eating more and more of it and we don't get satiated. We don't get enough. Notice that most of the time you're not running to broccoli or chicken breast or fruits. Even though you can indulge in those other foods, at the end of the day, it's way easier to overindulge in processed foods, simple foods that already have a bunch of modified ingredients in it that keeps us addicted to it. I'm not going to get too technical into the medical side or into the physiological side of it because I'm here for the psychological side. Most of the time, most people are either overeating because of the food addiction, and it's happening from a medium of boredom. Usually boredom eating will trigger it, or stress will trigger it as well. Stress. Let's start with stress. Stress is trying to control too many things all at once. A lot of times when we have deadlines or we have things to do, we may want not only an insulin high, but we may want a dopamine high from that food that we enjoy. So we reach out to that cookie or that cracker, and then we just keep going. And every time that we want to distract from a certain emotion, such as stress, we keep going to try to signal a type of deviation from that unwanted emotion. The same thing happens with boredom. We're bored, nothing to do, no feeling of no challenge. Then usually we reach out to that maladaptive food so that we can keep entertaining ourselves, our insulin, getting a little bit of a high, but then we're going to need more of it to get that high, that sugar high, or to get that dopamine high. So hypnotherapy works well in regulating whether it's boredom, stress, frustration, worry. All of these feelings, a lot of times we try to distract from that feeling, that the symptomology of the feelings is something that we don't enjoy. So we run to these foods so that our minds can take away that focus on that unwanted emotion, and we fall victim then to those cravings instead. So hypnotherapy, what I like that it does is that it puts us in a very relaxed state where we're able to communicate to our subconscious the changes that we want and the relationship that we want to change with food, particularly with which foods. So by regulating the emotion first, we're starting with stress, right? Stress, trying to control too many things all at once. Then cognitive hypnotherapy helps us to be able to concentrate, compartmentalize, and prioritize one thing at a time. So instead of our brains being able to switch from one thing to the other, which is usually good at because nowadays we have phones, all of these distractions and propaganda that are trying to get our attention, and our attention span then divides itself, and our neurobiochemistry gets accustomed to just dividing from one thing to the other fast and quick. That's why getting a cookie, going back to work, grabbing this cracker and going back to work, etc. The brain gets more stressed out when doing this, and then that makes us more predisposed to anxiety. Now with anxiety, it's a little bit tricky because with anxiety, when people are like really severe on anxiety, actually in the body produces more cortisol a lot of times, and it also produces more adrenaline, and sometimes a combination of these two can actually suppress our appetite. So that's why a lot of times I've seen clients coming in after a breakup or after a divorce, and they say that their appetite is just very low, and they're actually losing weight, but losing weight the wrong way. So that's why you'll hear a lot of times that when human beings are going through very traumatic transitions, then it's easier to not eat. The appetite's not is just not the same. So usually I see this with anxiety. Anxiety is the feeling of that I don't feel in control of the present, different from stress. but stress is the one that provokes anxiety usually. So usually when stress is really high, overeating is primarily coming in most of the time. It's either stress or boredom. Now with anxiety, if anxiety is mild or moderate, which means, that feeling of I don't feel in control of the now, every overeating or any overindulgence is really rooted in anxiety to some extent because it's a feeling of lack of self-control. And that lack of self-control is anxiety itself. There's control anxiety, which is a sort of perfectionism. If a perfectionist is dealing with not meeting certain expectations and they have a trigger, that can possibly also trigger anxiety. Worry can trigger it, frustration can trigger it, anger can trigger it to calm down. Just all of the other feelings, loneliness, sadness, and even guilt. But most of the time, I would say that the ones that show up primarily are boredom and stress when it comes to dysregulating with overeating or food addiction. The reason why most diets fail is because most diets, they come to sell you weight loss. And even though I'm using the keyword of weight loss, there's a difference between weight loss and fat loss. Fat loss, you're going after the fat. Weight loss, on the other hand, many of these diets that go really low carb to an extreme, and maybe even ketogenic diets are the fastest ones to get you results because they help a person being able to just throw out a whole bunch of water weight, whether it's water weight from sodium, whether it's water weight at the end of the day from not consuming carbs. When you consume carbs, you do store more muscle glycogen, especially if you're a lifter or if you're doing any type of strength training exercise. So a lot of these diets actually trick you into, you are losing fat, but you're losing a bunch of weight that can actually be beneficial when you're at the gym, when you're lifting. These diets can also pair you up with a whole bunch of HIIT cardio. The problem that I see happening with this is that even though one will get really fast results on losing 10 pounds in 3 weeks or whatever, it's mostly weight loss, not fat loss. Fat loss is going to come down to a caloric deficit. It doesn't, regardless of the diet that you use. But at the end of the day, maintaining a caloric deficit becomes difficult for a person long term, for any person dieting long term, because leptin drops way too much, way too fast. And leptin is responsible for regulating hunger. So this becomes an issue for people to stay consistent. So when leptin drops way too low, usually it will find an aggressive way to bring itself back up. And that's why you'll see many people that they do get close to their weight or even get to the ideal weight, but they can't maintain it because the leptin has dropped too low way too fast, and then they balloon back up to the same weight that they started or even go over it and get even more weight than them when they started the diet in the first place. So going back to emotional eating, stress, boredom, and sometimes dopamine seeking behavior. The relationships that we form with food can usually fall into 3 categories. Either it can become a habit. These 3 are different, but they're related at the same time. Habit is an automatic thought. It's easier. That's the easiest person that's coming in. If they're coming in here to do hypnosis for habitual eating, it's going to be the quickest amounts of therapies. Usually 3 to 4 sessions should do it. And that usually is what's needed. Then maybe maintenance to here and there monitor if what we're doing is working. But usually a person coming with a habit of eating will be the easiest person to be able to work with and get the results easy and fast. The reason why is because habit is an automatic thought. So it hasn't developed yet into the ones that I'm about to mention, which are a coping skill, which is a deviation. And a coping skill is that, man, I'm stressed, I'm going to go ahead and grab some popcorn, right? That already is turning into a maladaptive coping skill. And when that happens, then we're kind of like in the middle between habit and addiction. Not necessarily an addiction yet. It may just be a maladaptive coping skill and it sits there. But when it's a maladaptive coping skill, it can already be a habit. And then the last one and the most difficult is the addiction. Usually the client that comes in with food addiction will be obese, way beyond 20% body fat or more, 25%, 30% body fat. This individual will have a hard time panning away from, the sugars, the processed foods, the processed salts. Processed salts, potato chips are just sugar. They're just gonna taste different. They're gonna be salty, but at the end of the day, behaves like sugar in our bodies anyway. So we're dealing with the same type of addiction, which is usually sugar addiction. And addiction is now that it is in control of you instead of you in control of it. it now becomes an impulsive behavior where there is no filter to stop something. There's just I want it now. And all of us, to a certain extent, all of us humans, we are predisposed to some addiction. For many of us, it can be something different. It can be, someone's a workaholic, someone is overindulging in video games or listening to too much music, I've heard even, or addicted to pornography. But for many of us, it can be just food addiction and sugar addiction. So the way that cognitive hypnotherapy works is that it is able to very strongly be able to go back to earlier times where you felt that dysregulated feeling, be it stress or be it boredom. Go back to earlier times where you felt that way, and then not necessarily rewrite, even though there's different types of hypnotherapy, but the one that we do here at the clinical cognitive hypnotherapy, you're just doing age regression back to earlier times, feeling that dysregulated feeling, whether it be the chest, the stomach, where you feel it in your body, and then you're going back to earlier times that you felt that way and being able to establish a healthy cognition. Cognitions are the beliefs behind the emotion. So feeling safe, secure, loved, lovable, good enough in that memory. And then scanning to see if navigating that memory, we were able to regulate that feeling and the feelings that accompany it, be it stress, anxiety, frustration, depression, hopelessness, anger, guilt, sadness, loneliness, or boredom. So once we regulate that feeling, that emotion, usually another memory before that memory opens until we find what's called the initial synthesizing event. The first time that you started feeling that feeling of stress or boredom at a very early age. Usually this happens between the ages of 10 and below. And then when we do that, then we're able to move over to progressions, which is being able to establish an individualism where we're no longer codepending on that feeling to get certain things done. Because a lot of times, whatever feeling that is helping us some way or another. All emotions are really helping us. They're kind of like the light on a dashboard of a car telling us what needs attention. And so a lot of times it's actually beneficial to us. The problem is that when we choose to react the wrong way to that emotion and act impulsively, then it can be detrimental to our health and our psyche. That's where cognitive hypnotherapy comes in, to balance mind and body so that we're no longer actively just acting automatically, impulsively to that detrimental action. So how long it takes to get these results is dependent on if we are at a habit level, if we are at a coping skill, maladaptive coping skill level, or if it's an addiction. So I know that I did not continue going forward on that when I first said if a person has a habit. So a habit would be 3 to 4 sessions sometimes. It can be more, it can be less, it can be around that ballpark. For a person with a maladaptive coping skill, 6 to 8. And then for a person doing an addiction or dealing with an addiction with food addiction, then it would be 8 to 12 sessions usually. But this is way less than doing psychotherapy or a coaching for just a plain coaching for food addiction of any sorts, food habit or food maladaptive coping skill. So this is way quicker because it goes right to the grain, right to the initial synthesizing event, right to the core of events that triggered that maladaptive coping with that emotion. So it is very useful, very fast. And so we move to the next question, which is, who is this for? Well, people that have tried multiple diets, most of the diets that are very extreme, like Atkins or just keto, where no carbs at all. I'm not really a fan of those diets. I am a fan of diets where you're getting all your macros, all your macronutrients, all your macronutrients and micronutrients, where you're not excluding one or the other. For example, I think it's detrimental for many athletes. I work with athletes also in sports psychology. Detrimental to take away carbs because carbs give you kind of like that glycogen, that muscle glycogen, that explosion. So usually, taking away carbs completely dwindles performance. And then if it's a person that's just a casual lifter, taking away the carbs, that can, a lot of times I've seen clients complaining of insomnia and a whole bunch of other cascade of issues that happen because of just excluding carbs completely. So I think the best combo that I think exists out there is the combination of kind of like paleo dieting on the days you don't hit the gym. And I recommend that people hit the gym going lifting on core compound movements such as squats, deadlifts, pull-ups, chin-ups, and bench press 3 days a week. Nothing crazy like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example. And then really honing in on the days you don't hit the gym, just doing a paleo diet, 2 pieces of fruit is more than enough. And then on the days case you do hit the gym, then depending on what your body size and your goals, to hit around 100 to 300 grams of starches, be it white rice or potatoes. Of course, take these recommendations that I just said, on the diet part, if you want to try it out on your own. Make sure that you're consulting with your physician before doing this. You got your disclaimer right there, because that's not the field that I concentrate on. I concentrate on sticking to the consistency of whichever diet that you pick. But I believe that the most sustainable diets long term paired with this type of therapy is, to do a type of like intermittent fasting with carb cycling. I think that's sustainable. And a lot of times you can even do 2 or 1 refeeds where you eat something that you like, that you've been craving at least once or twice a week. And that actually serves as a carb refeed, reset leptin. Of course, recommendations of your PCP and your general practitioner approves, your medical doctor. So this is for anyone out there who wants to get very core results and stick to that and maintain the core results once you reach there, not just balloon back up to where you were or even worse. So the way that we get started at Revive Therapy is if you book up a consultation with us, at first we're going to break down which emotion and which triggers are coming to you first, and how many times you work out, how your sleep is doing. We gauge all of these things so that we can know what are the factors that are really blocking you. That way, one thing at a time, one emotion at a time, we focus on the one that needs more attention. If we try to focus on too many things all at once, we're going to become jack of all trades, master of none, and it can actually backfire. That's why we concentrate on just one goal, one target, and then that does kind of like a snowball domino effect on the other factors. The other factors get way easier. That's the way that we do it at Revive. So if you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Have you had any issues with dieting? Have you felt like you've been yo-yo dieting in the past? Did you do a protocol that was actually, really effective, but then it dwindled down, or you got older and then it didn't work again when you tried it? Put your comments below, all right? And I'll be happy to answer them. So this is Revive Therapy, Jose de la Cruz. Thank you. And I hope to see you on the next video.